Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Calvin Correli, and we're going to be looking at intuitive naming for amazing joy and profits in your business. And in the show, we're going to look at how he changed his name 3 times, how he picked his business name and product name using his intuition, and how he overcame being emotionally shut down and opened up 10 years ago with the help of an amazing spiritual teacher. And we'll tell you the details on that in a moment. And perhaps most importantly for entrepreneurs listening, how he integrates all the money, practical stuff, and strategy with the spiritual stuff, because a lot of us have difficulty with that. So I'm curious to find out how you do that, Calvin. And if we have time, we'll have a look at some of his controversial views on intuitive country design. He wants to create his own country, so that sounds interesting. And why good customer service is key to your business success. So welcome, Calvin.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I am so happy you're here. So I've heard of people changing the name once or twice, but 3 times, that sounds impressive.
Yes. Yeah. I don't do things small, I guess. I was basically, it's one big change and then adjustments. Let's put it that way. But I was born Lars Holger Pind in Denmark, and I didn't like the name much. And it was very complicated in the US in particular, like how to pronounce it in a way that people understood. And it was just not, I wasn't a huge fan. And so I met these people who were into numerology, and I kind of started to get the idea that you could actually change your name. So, and I met my current wife who had changed her name already. And then I was like, all right, let's do it. So I met with this guy actually in New York, a Danish guy who walked me through it. So it's a system, and it basically, like, every letter has a value. You add them up, and then you do the sum of sums of each of the words in your name, or each of the names in your name, and then you combine that with the day of month that you're born, and you do this math on it. And it tells you things about how your life is, right? How it is kind of outward and how it is inwards. And he walked through that for me, and I was like, whoa, that hits home. And then he was like, here's what I propose for you instead, as like I want to give you 3 names, and they got to hit these numbers. He was asking, like, can we just like go wild and change anything, or do you want to keep like certain names or anything? I was like, just go for it. And so he walks through that, and he's like, here's what things are going to be with the name change. And I'm like, that sounds pretty fantastic. And then he gets to the point where he starts to share with me these lists of names that have these values. And I look at them, and I'm like, oh, wait. So I'm actually supposed to change my name here. Like, I knew that was what I was going in for, but it hadn't really sunk in. And it actually took me a year. Like, my wife and I, we sat down and looked at these lists and picked some names that we liked and that felt like me. And then I sat on it for a year because I was just too scared. I was just too scared to, like, that change in identity, and especially for me, like, what all my old friends would think, and family members and stuff. And then
what did they think?
Most people have been fine. Some people are like, weird. It took my dad a little time to get over it, but now he's fine. And now it feels like it's so long ago. It was like 5 years ago, and I'm like, at the same time I moved from Denmark first to try to move to America, and didn't get a visa, and then we ended up living in India for a year. And so I met so many new people who didn't know me as anything else. So it was just, I got very used to it very quickly, and then now it just feels awkward to think that I had a different name once. It's fun too, but it's like every once in a while I'll reach out to some old, acquaintance that I knew years ago, and I'll like send an email in my old name, just to because otherwise it's weird, because they might not know at all, right? If we haven't been in touch for this period. And then after we've broken ice, I can tell, oh, by the way, I've changed my name to this. And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I knew that. I saw that. But yeah, and I picked it because I was like, Calvin, I wanted to be Calvin J. Conaway. Calvin, because one of the quotes that have stuck with me forever is this Calvin Coolidge quote, or is like persistence is everything. Like talent is, you know, there's lots of talented people who didn't never make it. There is skilled people, intelligent people, whatever. I forget the exact quote, but basically the only thing that really matters is persistence. Stay with it. And that was a quote that kept me going for years and years when I was struggling. Just like, keep going, something will happen. And so I like that name Calvin. Also, well, I didn't actually realize at the time, like hardly anyone is named Calvin anymore. But,
Calvin and Hobbes, maybe.
Yeah, Calvin Klein, but it's not a name that you meet a lot around, you know.
No.
But I kind of like that. And then I had an employee years ago whose name was, his middle name was just the letter S. It wasn't short for anything. His parents had just literally named him the letter S. So I loved that, and that worked out with the numerology. So I was going to be just J. But authorities in Denmark wouldn't let me do that, so I became Jeremiah. And then
they don't let you have a single letter name in Denmark?
No.
Are there any other restrictions to being in Denmark?
Lots. Yeah. So when we got to our third name change, actually, so we you know, there's something about the Conaway that didn't really sit right with me. And then we met another numerologist who was like, you know what, this. And so we changed it so that our last name was Correli. And the way that came about was like, we wanted something that was similar to what we changed it to already, the Conaway. But then the rules in Denmark are that you have to pick a name that nobody has or more than 2,000 people have. And there's only so many names. There's only like 12 names that are the so-called free last names that more than 2,000 people have. These are the Nielsen and Anderson and Hansen and like all those you can just take. But anything else, if there's less than 2,000 people that have this name, you have to get a written permission from every single one. So we're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So we just made up our own name. So I was like looking at Steve Carell. I was like, that has like a nice ring to it, and that kind of fits this. But that didn't work numerologically. So we ended up throwing an I on it and being Correli. And that seemed right. And I've had this long love for Italy for years and years, and it sounds a little Italian, even though it's spelled in a way you wouldn't do in Italy. And then I was like, yeah, let's do this. And actually, the last time we changed our names was also just an adjustment. My wife and I found out that it would actually be slightly superior if we swapped. We're both born on the 27th of the month. I'm born on the 27th of March, and she's on the 27th of June. And so we're numerologically actually very, very similar. And then, so we could swap numerous, we could swap numbers. So I had to suddenly have 4 names. And I was actually in line down at the courthouse downtown New York here, looking over lists, picking my name through the line. So my middle name of Norbert. So now I'm actually Sheldon Calvin Norbert Correli.
All right.
Full name. Yeah.
Sounds very presidential.
It is, doesn't it? Yeah. I can't be president over here yet, unless they change
Not yet,
law,
not until they change the constitution, then you'll be able to slip in at the last minute. You know?
Exactly. I don't think
so. I'm kind of, I mean, this sounds a lot of fun, but I'm kind of curious, what effects have you noticed in your business and life and energetically since you did this?
Yeah. So, I mean, my life is like so different today than it was back then, in terms of relationship with myself, relationship with others. The business is doing like radically different, but better. Health, everything in my life has improved tremendously.
Wow.
Is it because of numerology? I have no idea, right? I don't really care. I'm not like a staunch believer in numerology or really anything. I'm like,
it's just the technology.
It's, yeah, if it maybe works, maybe it doesn't. I don't care. I didn't like the name I had. Whether it was because of numerology or any of the other hundreds of things I've done to improve my life, I don't know. I don't really care. For me, it was fun. I think the bigger thing about it is, like you're asking before we started here, like, who do you want to be today?
Yes.
I think the bigger advantage is like really getting that experience of letting go of your identity at such a deep level, right? Like, I don't even have the same name anymore. Like, I don't have to be the same person. I also moved to a different country, and so many things happened. I think that was tremendously helpful as well, just taking me out of the environment that I was in, that was knew me as a certain identity, and just being able to reinvent myself. And like, that's who I was then. Now here's, this is who I want to be now. So,
well, and that's the great thing about travel. It totally frees you up from your old identity from the country you were born in or wherever you lived for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see now when I go back, I have 2 children in Denmark with my ex-wife, and they still live there. My parents live there, like all my family live there. And every time, like when I go back, especially now, I can just see how powerful it was to be able to go far away, kind of rediscover myself, clean up all the family dysfunctional like crap that we bring with us from our upbringing, and then go back and meet everyone from that place. I have radically different relationships with everybody at this point, and that's
great.
It feels so fantastic. Yeah.
I mean, one way I've looked at it is, mother, father, sister, brother, son, daughter, ex-wife, whatever, all just labels we put on people, and really they're just infinite spiritual beings like we are, totally. who we've given all this baggage to.
Yeah. Exactly.
And we don't have to. We can see them as spiritual beings.
Yeah. Yes. And Ram Dass, like, if you think you're so enlightened, go back and spend a week with your family. Right.
That was Ram Dass who said that?
That was Ram Dass, yeah.
Oh. And I never met his family.
No. I bet they're a mouthful. But yeah, it's like really like realizing every time you go, you have those, you go back to see your parents again, and it's challenging. It's just an invitation to look at like, what is this about now, right? And it doesn't have to be challenging at all.
No,
it can be absolutely amazing. Yeah.
Well, and just as other people's families generally are not challenging to us.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't trigger us in those ways. Yeah.
Right. So it's quite possible to get to that point where your family doesn't trigger you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love how I would describe it is you kind of reverse engineered the numerology. Usually people use numerology forwards to go from a name and a date of birth to get information, but it reverse engineered and said, okay, here's who I want to be. Okay, here are names that will get me there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And I wrote software for this, of course. So I wrote my own software that would go through and like grab all last names in America and see. That's how we came up with Conaway. And for my company as well, my company name, the actual company corporation is named Powerful Through Grace, which is also like, we came up with that name based on the numerology and like obviously how we see things. The product name is Simplero, and that too was a big process of coming up with that name. But again, I was like working to hit certain numbers, so I wrote this software that would like, I could just throw ideas at it. It could tell me the numbers, whether it was good or bad. It would automatically look up and see if the .com domain was available, things like that. So I could filter through it quickly.
This is next level business practices. So
yes, yeah.
You've got a search engine that finds powerful names that have a domain available, and then you were also tweaking with what date you were going to incorporate it as well.
Oh, you bet. Yeah. I had this beautiful lawyer, Lisa Fraley is her name, who was totally on board with all of this stuff, and so she did research into how to get it done, so we incorporated on exactly the right day. We actually went through and changed the company name as well a couple of years ago. Originally it was Easy World Teaching Institute, and then we changed it to Powerful Through Grace, and that name change had to happen on a certain date as well. So she found that if we expedited it, paid an expedition fee, and then at the same time sent it on a specific date, then it would be, and then kindly asked that as well, I think, just to make sure. But that worked out perfectly.
And this is very common in Asia. Chinese people do this all the time, not necessarily using numerology. They may be using astrology, but the date that and time they incorporate a company or they launch a product, they're very careful about how they do that, or start a building or whatever the thing is. Yeah. So auspicious time, I think, is the technical term, right?
Yeah, India is big on that kind of thing as well. They have their almanacs.
Well, I think there's something to it. And even if it's a bunch of whatever, it's because billions of people believe it. There's so much energy tied up in all the people who do believe it that you can tap into it by doing it.
Yeah.
Well, that's my view.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've messed with my own astrology, and I didn't like my astrology, so I shifted the astrology.
How do you do that?
Um, I just did energy work on it. I made myself bigger, as big as the whole universe, and then the planets were so teeny tiny that I just moved them around a bit until I got what I wanted. So,
I like
similar
that.
concept. I
Yes.
mean, all of this is a creation we've done as humans, incarnating, that we create these little systems, but
Sure.
they don't have to be. It's not like slavery where the numerology has to control you and it's your karma or fate or all that stuff. Like, we're powerful spiritual beings and we can do whatever we want. So,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
so changing your name, changing your astrology, picking company names, product names, it's all a little game we play.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah.
So you mentioned when we were talking before the interview that you were pretty emotionally shut down, which is hard to believe because you seem pretty emotionally present.
Yes.
So tell us how come you were so shut down and how you came to open up 10 years ago.
Well, I mean, why is that? That's what I learned, right? That's what I learned growing up. It was like nobody was really in touch with what they were feeling or saying what they were feeling. And it was all like this life of like, you have some, like, you're feeling hurt or scared or like feel like you have some need for something. And then instead of just expressing that, oh, I'm scared, then you go back inside. You don't even realize like what you're feeling exactly. And then you try to rationalize and figure out a strategy. What words can I say so that I get my needs met from this other family member without revealing anything about myself and without, actually acknowledging. And then like it becomes this whole loop of and I lived like that for so many years. And
was this special to your family, or is the whole of Denmark basically this way?
I don't think it's uncommon.
Or maybe it depends on what name they have and their date of birth and their numerology,
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. I think this is, I think it's also like particularly bad for me because I am a very emotional person and very, very like unusual in many, many ways. And that was, it wasn't recognized, and it was like weird and different and scary and all that. So I just learned to like, keep everything to myself and like just let it build up inside. And
so
I
you
married.
hid your creativity and artistic side, or?
Yes. Yeah. And my emotions and just like anything and like all the things that I was ashamed of and scared of. And in particular, it seemed like fear was something that was not dealt with very well in my family. I spent a week with my dad last year. For the first time in my entire life, that me and my dad have spent a week together, just him and I. We were driving down Highway 1 in California. And I taught him to, instead of like saying something like, slow down, I taught him to say, I'm scared. And it worked really well, right? Because once he says that, I'm like, naturally, I'm like, oh, I don't want you to feel scared. But when he says, slow down, I feel like controlled and like I feel like not.
And what was that coping mechanism you used to cover up fear, to go into controlling others or controlling yourself? Or?
Yes, definitely. And it was what was being used in my family. Yeah, definitely. And like, yeah, not even recognizing that you're afraid, right?
Yeah, and just for people who may think control is a kind of handy thing to have, what's the bad side of control? Because I mean, the traditional business view is you try and control everything, pretty much, right?
Yeah, how's that working?
Not so well these days.
Right. I mean, especially like controlling other people to try to get your needs met. It never ends up feeling good for either party, right? The only way it ends up feeling good is if like you're being open and you can invite the other person to do something with you and it feels good for both of you, then it's amazing. And it might be the same thing kind of on the surface, but the energy behind it of where you're coming from. And like every time you just open up and reveal yourself, like, I feel scared right now, it instantly just hits a button in other people that makes them like almost all people, makes them want to be like, oh, you know, it touches them and it invites them to open up, and now we can start to have a real relationship.
You know, I have a dream that one day all leaders in our business community and country will be okay doing that. Can you
Yeah,
imagine Congress in the United States
we
where
need
people
that.
are admitting their fears and being vulnerable and saying what they
Totally.
really want?
And doubt, like, honestly, I'm not sure what to do here. You know, can
Hmm.
we talk about it? You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, because that's not allowed for politicians typically, right? They're
no,
supposed to know what to do at all times.
yeah, yeah, and can't change their minds and all that crazy stuff. Yeah.
I mean, that's nuts. Things change. I mean, the world's so chaotic. There's so much change in technology and society and other things, and the whole spiritual set of changes that are going on.
Yeah,
That how could
absolutely.
you have a policy that doesn't evolve and change?
Right. And if you don't, I mean, like, never changing your mind or asking people to not change their minds is the same as saying that you assume they're right about everything. I don't think that's possible. Right. So
Hmm.
the only way, like, I'm always like, when I realize I've been wrong about something, I'm like, yeah, let's celebrate. Hey, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. It's progress. You know, I learned something new. Like, we want that, right? We want to learn something new. And the only way that you can learn something new is to realize that you didn't know it before. So I was
That
shut
is a
down for
great
many
way to
years,
look
and
at it.
then, yeah, yeah, it's cause for celebration. Just like a lot of people don't like feeling incompetent, but the only way that you learn something is by feeling incompetent first, or you never try anything new, and then you can stay within that small confine of where you can feel confident or competent.
So how did you get to open up? Because you sound like you were really in a shut down, really tight box. So that's
Yeah, well, I guess at some point I didn't have the option of staying shut down anymore. I had a big crisis of meaning after my daughter was born, and she kind of turned one, and I realized I wasn't where I wanted to be in my life. Like, it was like, from an ego point of view, I was very like, here, this is where I need to be in order to be okay and successful, and I wasn't there. And so that pain just grew to be too much. And so I started to look into help. I've started to work with a therapist, and I also got a coach education. I hired a coach, and that very quickly led me to realize I want to learn this stuff for myself. And it kind of, my self-image changed over those years, from like being like, I'm not a people person, I'm bad with people, to realizing actually that's kind of the opposite of the truth, you know. It was really crazy. And yeah, so I started to learn more and do this work, and I realized that I really enjoyed it. And I think that combination of like a logical math brain with actual good emotional availability, once I started to open up, was really amazing. One of the things that really helped me was this body therapy, which is actually a Danish developed system. It's called Body SDS. And what it is it's, you're on a massage table, but they work on your front side. They won't work on both sides, but they start on your front side, and it's not a traditional massage in any way. It's very much like opening up the energy system of the body, and then opening up emotionally. So like, whatever has been shut down in your body gets eventually stored in your body as muscle tension and other things. And then as they go in and they release that stuff, all of these old things come out. So I liken it to kind of like empty out the reservoirs. So, right, you've like all these things that you didn't want to feel, so you store them away, and now they need to
hmm
get out somehow. And so, like,
hmm
for a while, it was like every time I was getting triggered, I was like, yes, fantastic, because like that's an opportunity for, I still have it that way, but like for a period, it was pretty intense, of like everything, all kinds of things would trigger pain, and I'd just be like walking down the street starting to cry, and it would feel really awesome. It would feel so good to be crying there. But the body SDS was, the first time I tried it, this guy was working on my front side, especially the belly area. There's a lot of, it's like the switchboard for every emotional stuff in the body. And then he was working on my front side, and then he just leaves me there for like 20 minutes to steep on my own. And during those 20 minutes, I would be crying, like really crying, and then laughing, and then crying again, and then laughing some more. And it would just come in these waves for 20 minutes nonstop, and it felt fantastic. And I wasn't crying about anything. I wasn't sad. I wasn't like, there was no story attached to it. It was just like tears coming out of me, and it was, and laughter. And it was just so fantastic. I've tried it several times since, and you know, I go, and actually my wife now is trained in this system. So I have firsthand access, but this is such an amazing tool. Yeah. It can really,
I think that's a great thing, whatever body work you do or energetic work to release stuck things. Because I definitely think we stash, if we don't want to handle something, we stash it somewhere in our body. Often we stash it in places that we don't notice, like a common place is behind our backs, you know, somewhere in the back part of the body, because you don't notice that as much. But if we leave stuff stashed there for too long, or we keep repeatedly sticking crap into the same body area, guess what? It gets sick. You know,
exactly.
So it's not just that your life sucks a bit, but you get unhealthy. You know, I honestly think there's no reason for humans to get old and die other than through choice. But you know, 99.9% of people stash all this stuff in their body and then wonder why they're not feeling so good.
Exactly. Yeah, and it cuts down our access to intuition, to body intelligence, right? To all that our bodies have to offer. So we're limited in our resources as well. And I think especially for someone like me who's very, very mental, I really used to live from like the neck down, up, you know, like like my body is just this vehicle to transport my brain around, but that's the brain is all.
That sounds like a Dalek.
A what?
If you've ever seen Doctor Who.
Oh, no.
A Dalek, you know, those creatures that only have like, they have a metal robot body, and they're very logical, and they always want to go around killing other creatures because they're too happy and get to cry, and they don't. You know?
Exactly. That's pretty much, that's exactly it. Like these people like Ray Kurzweil and others who believe honestly, in all seriousness, that you would be able to download your human consciousness onto like some SD card or whatever, and then put that consciousness into, like, I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Like most of who we are is like as much in the body and the spirit as like in this brain. Like that.
I think it could theoretically be done. I mean, I communicate with my electronic equipment. You know, if my computer's not doing things well, I'll like talk to the software, the hardware, the internet, and all the other bits.
Sure.
And they have a very different kind of consciousness and way of being. It's so if you did I mean, I think technically you could do it, but it would be very distorting.
Yeah, I don't see how you could get like all of the emotional and spiritual complexity of who we are onto that thing and then into another. I don't think that we're in this lifetime as who we are is separable from our bodies. Well,
maybe if you totally emulated the body in software, you could do it. But you know, you could go back a few million years and say, "Oh, I don't think we can take these infinite spiritual beings and cram them into a little baby's body." You know, and a lot of people, when they incarnate, if they have memories of their babyhood or childhood, are like, "What happened? I used to be infinite, and now I can't do all the things I used to be able to do."
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You could be right. So yeah, for me, the point I was trying to make is for me, having been someone who used to live very, very much in my head, I can see that it's easy for me still to get into a place of not really being fully present in my body. So it's super helpful to regularly have different types of body work, and that opens up and like that reminds me, oh yeah, like it just expands my world again and again, right? So
or any kind of, if you can just stand up and move around or dance or do yoga or have sex or play music or whatever you do.
That's right.
I'm just listing things from your bio here, you know. So you also got help by meeting Bodhi Jeffries, who, you know, he helped you open up even more. And we'll put his link in the thing, but he was like a signpost on your route to spiritual growth by the sound.
Yeah, I feel like he was the one that really kind of cracked me open in that way. I worked with him for 2 years. We would speak on the phone every week at a fixed time. I lived in Copenhagen. He lives in Encinitas in California. So we had 9-hour time difference. and I didn't see him. He was just this disembodied voice to me, which was
Maybe he's in a computer chip, you know.
he could I've met him in real life since then. But there's something very powerful about that, actually, like not having to relate to a human being, but just like having the conversation by voice. That worked really well for me.
And I'm just going to imagine he probably did some energetic shifts with you as well.
Yeah, it wasn't like, deep shaman type stuff. It was more like just like having me pay attention to what was going on in my body a lot, and a lot of like time travel, in the sense of like whatever I notice in my body, something is twitching in the shoulder or whatever, and then we go in there and just see what kind of pictures and stories come up, and then maybe there's some old moment that happened when I was a kid or whatever, and then I like go back and replay that episode with who I am today, being there, being able to speak in my ear, and just like walk through that situation with someone on my side, if you will. And that seemed to be super powerful. I had some very, very powerful experiences with that. And, just whatever. He was like he doesn't come with like a plan or anything. It's just like every week, just meet and see what's up. What does the energy move us to do here?
So I know we talked earlier about how you integrate all the money, practical stuff, strategy, and your spiritual side. And that's the thing that a lot of people have difficulty with. So just tell us briefly how you do that.
Yeah. Well, it's a couple different things. Like, first of all, like the way I look at my business is we provide a product, a tool for people that does certain functions that they need in their business, email marketing, and taking money and delivering content for courses and all that stuff. But really, what I'm doing is I'm trying subvertively to hold the space for our customers to turn into be the biggest version of themselves, to really step into a place that's like more alive, more of them being in essence, more empowered. And we do see that with our customers, that as they get going and they get better at this stuff, like it transforms their lives and their relationships all around. We have a lot of female entrepreneurs who use our software and end up being this breadwinner for the family, and their husbands start to work for them and things like that. And I love seeing that, and it's something that I'm very intentional about. This is not just a tool that solves the problem. This is really a transformational tool that I wanted to have that effect of opening up the hearts and minds and consciousness of everybody who comes into contact with it. And the people that we have as customers are doing the same thing for their customers. So we're touching a lot of people's lives. So that's kind of one thing. And at the same time, I'm sitting there writing code, and I have a good brain for strategy, so that comes pretty easy. Of course, we want to be strategic about things, but not in a manipulative way. Just about like, well, what comes before this, right? Like, you want to focus on your conversion before you focus on getting a lot of leads in the door, right? Like that, those kinds of like just common sense kind of strategic stuff. Another example is hiring. So it's something that was a struggle for me for many years, finding the right people to work for me. And it was something, both my parents had companies, were they're separate companies. My mom started a software company and grew that to 50 people back in the 80s. And my dad had another company that was even bigger, doing metal shop fitting and wood and things like that. But one thing I saw was that they actually always struggled with finding good people, finding the right people, and having good relationships with those people. And it was tough for me as well. So what I did was like attack it at all levels. So both just like a concrete practical level of like, well, what's a process for getting candidates in and filtering them out and screening them, etc. Reading books about them, about that, and team building and those kinds of things. But I also looked at kind of the emotional mindset piece of, I realized, for example, that as a kid, I'd gotten a lot of acknowledgement for being good at programming, and there's still, that part was still active in me. And so I was afraid that if I got a really good developer in, that he would be better than me, and then he would get, you know, mom's or dad's praise more than me and things like that. So I worked on that. And then I have a healer that I work with on a weekly basis these days. And so, bring it up with her and like look at what kind of energies are going on in my body, and like whatever things come up in those sessions around this, around other things. So really looking at it from all levels, and just, I don't set deadlines. I'm not on a timetable. I just keep like making progress on it at all levels. And then eventually what ended up happening was actually super beautiful, because what happened was my dad celebrated his 80th birthday, and I went to that. And then I saw my daughter there, because I was in Denmark. So and my son didn't want to see me, and their mom thought that was a good idea, then that he shouldn't see me. So I didn't see him. And then, so what happened was my dad asked me to be Toastmaster, which means I had to coordinate speeches, and like there was this whole thing. And I had to take my daughter back home as well. And so I was like, should I could get someone else to be the Toastmaster and take her. I could get someone else to take her, or you know what? Copenhagen is a very, very safe city. I could just send her home in a taxi alone. She's 11. She's 12 now. She was 11 or something. That honestly should be fine. So I asked her mom if that was okay. She was like, no. So someone else, some other parent, took her home. It was all fine. And then I got an email from her saying, because of this, I can never see them again, and definitely they can never visit me here, because I would just be out partying and send them home alone in a taxi in New York City and like all this stuff. So she decided that I should not see them, which of course I didn't accept. So I had to take her through the legal process of like getting the government to interfere in this stuff. And that led to not only like now we have a great working relationship. My kids have been over here many times, and it's been amazing, and all that is all sorted. But also because of this, I had to go to a meeting in Copenhagen with the government over this, and that's when I met my Nick, who's now my business partner, and is like the most intelligent person I've ever met, and like super good at running all the development stuff and technical stuff, and basically being like a business owner alongside me. So I'm so grateful. It worked out better than I could ever have imagined, And one kind of showed me the way. I didn't realize how important it was for me to work with people who are super intelligent. This guy has the highest GPA of a high school exam in Denmark ever, and the highest you mathematically can get, so nobody can beat him. Just to give you an illustration. And I just realized that's what I need. That's what I need from the people that I work with. And so like everybody on my team has, like I had one other person on the team at that point, she had to go. And then everybody has come after, and we're just putting something together that's super gelling now. So yeah.
That makes total sense to me. It's funny how the things that look really terrible at the time turn out to be the most blessed thing that could have happened. You'd never have met that business partner and changed your business that way for more profits and joy if your wife hadn't been doing that back then. So
yes,
totally amazing.
So I love her. I'm so grateful.
Yeah. So I know we're up against a time limit for our conversation today, but I'd love to have you back another time to talk about how you're designing a new country, and about customer service and many other things to do with intuition and business. So
I would be delighted to. That'd be super fun.
Yeah. And if people wanted to find you online, how could they best do that?
The best way right now is to go to my software company, simplero.com, simplero.com, and sign up for the newsletter there. There's a box at the bottom of the screen. And I write, we talk about the software and those things, obviously, but I also write a weekly newsletter on Fridays. That's like my corner where I talk about exactly these kinds of things that we've been talking about today. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. So we'll put all those URLs and the other ones we mentioned in the episode in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll hope you have the same name when you come back on the show in a few months.
You never know. And my email is calvin@simplero.com. And you can also just hit reply to all these emails to the newsletters. I'll get them. So
excellent.
Not hard to reach.
That is good. With a name like yours, it would be impossible to hide because when you Google your name, like you're it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show, Calvin.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to everybody who's listening. It was a pleasure. It was super fun.